Meanwhile, the British Prime Minister is expected back in Parliament to face questions from MPs, and then nominations will open as to who will be his successor. After the so-called Brexit vote, Cameron announced he'll step down in October. Former London Mayor Boris Johnson, the primary backer of the Leave campaign, and Home Secretary Theresa May, who backed Remain, are considered the frontrunners. So let's dig a little bit deeper here with Sarah Morice, who's in London. Now, Sarah, David Cameron is back from Brussels, well and truly, and is about to face Prime Minister's, questions in general at Parliament. Do you think he'll be expecting a fairly rough ride today?
Yeah, I think he'll get a pretty rough time, as you say there. While he was having his last supper, so to speak, in Brussels last night at the EU table, he said a few things that I suspect will upset a few people back here in London. One of them being that it was with sadness and regret that he had to come to the table and say that Britain was leaving the EU. Now, there's a lot of people here in the UK who are not sad and do not regret that Britain is leaving the EU. So it's certainly going to be a problem for him there, and he'll face questions on that. On top of that, he also said, that the UK should not be turning its back on the EU and that they need to find a way to work with trade and with security. But the EU must come up with some plan when it comes to immigration. Of course, you heard there from John Brain that he does not want to see this freedom of movement. Well, a lot of people will be asking questions back here about how he can say something like that when he's got absolutely no power to do anything about it. Of course, he will no longer be sitting at the table, and most of the time the UK will not be sitting at the table, certainly while they're discussing Brexit things in the EU. So certainly he's got a lot to face today. On top of that, of course, some of the people he's sitting next to will be the people who will probably be trying to replace him now that his leadership is open for contest.
Well, on that, in fact, the starting gun to replace him pretty much is fired today. So we've talked about some of the potential names that could replace him. Who else could be in the running here, and how does the process work? Just talk us through that a bit.
Well, we'll start with the process. So today the nominations open, and they're really open for a very short time. It'll just be today, and tomorrow they will close. Now, what happens? Everyone who wants to throws their hat in the ring, and at the end of that, then the MPs, the Conservative MPs, talk amongst themselves and vote amongst themselves, and they whittle those candidates down to just the two. And once they've got those two candidates, then they are thrown open to be put forward in front of the rest, or mainly Conservative members. So it's thrown much more widely to the Conservative membership, and then they will vote on who actually becomes the new leader and, of course, in this case, the new Prime Minister. Now, that should all be done and dusted by about the 9th of September, we think, and that will be well and truly in time for the autumn convention that the Conservative Party will be holding. Now, when it comes to who do we think is going to be that person, who's going to be the new leader and the new Prime Minister, well, you mentioned the two front-runners, and Boris Johnson, Theresa May. When you look at Boris Johnson, he was originally the bookies' favourites, and that's because he's so visible. He's known not just here in the UK, but also right across the world. He's the former London mayor, and he was a very visible London mayor. Of course, he also has that stumbling, bumbling personality and really unconventional political style, which makes him stand out. But if he did lead, of course, the Leave campaign, so it puts him in the hot seat. But the bookies are now actually starting to back Theresa May. Now, she's the Home Secretary. She's been in that position since 2010, seen as unflappable. She did back the Remain campaign, but stayed pretty quiet. So basically, when it comes to her, she could be seen as a great alternative and someone who could unite the country.
All right, I feel a bit left with a jungled lucky dip from all of that. Sarah, thanks very much for that.